Yes, the graphic was about to read out those who voted for and against the amendment of the Constable of St Brelard.
Those members who voted pour, Senators Gorst, Farnham, Ferguson, Moore, Mezek. Constables of St Lawrence, St Brelard, Grouville, St Peter, St Mary, St Juan, St Martin, St John. And Deputies Southern, Lewis, Tadier, Higgins, Hinnell, St Juan, St Mary, Young, Ash, Morel, St Peter, St John, Lahegra, Ward, Pamplin and Gardner. Those members who voted contra were Senators Lafondre and Pallet, the Constable of St Clement, and Deputies Martin, Grouville, St Martin, Doublé, Labby, Wickenden, Truscott, Guida, Trinity, Aye.
Thank you. We now turn to the 87th Amendment as amended. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Yes, Deputy St Martin.
So I haven't prepared a speech for this, but I can only urge members to think very carefully about what they're voting for here. This amendment now seeks to stop the redevelopment of a building for residential use that makes it bigger or taller or wider, the extension of a building for residential use, and any development pretty much that's seen from the beach or from coastal headlands. It always makes it impossible to do any development at all in St Bullard's Bay. I cannot believe that there can be universal support for this in this area of the island. It's going to have a massive effect on St Bullard's Bay. I know the proposer and the supporters of the proposal will say that's a good thing, but there's no balance here. Planning is about balance, and this is not a balance. I can't support it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on the... Yes, Constable St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. And really just to briefly sum up, and I'm sure the previous speaker will have experience as a maritime person, of the view from seaward of St Brellard's Bay is terribly important. And anybody passing by sea, and that accounts for a lot of the visitors coming to the island, don't want to see big blocks of buildings. What we've got at the moment needs preserving in a modern sort of way. A lot can be done with architecture on smaller sites, and it was alluded to before. Some smart architecture will achieve what I believe people want. So I'm pleased to support the amended proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Constable. No other member wishes to speak? Deputy Tadier. Forgive me, my chat's function is broken, so I may be slow in reaching those on the chat. Yes, Deputy Tadier.
Okay, so I'd only just put it in, so you were very quick, in fact. So I didn't speak on the main part. I was happy to listen to the arguments made, and I thought the Constable of St Bullard's put it forward very well. Just to pick up on the Deputy of St Martin's points, it's like he said he can't believe this has universal support. Well, it doesn't have universal support, but it does have majority support within the Assembly, and that's of course how democracy works. And for my part, I'm very pleased that there are sufficient safeguards being put into St Bullard's Bay. It is already a balance. St Bullard's Bay is a working, commercial, residential beach, and long has it been so. And I think getting that balance right has always been tricky, because it is, I think it's a word that's overused sometimes, but it is a vibrant bay, especially in the sunny days. It doesn't even have to be in the summer. And what we're saying, and what the Constables quite rightly picked up on, is the vibe of all users of the bay is that we don't want it spoiled. We recognise that balance. And if members want to go and spoil St Helier, if past planners have been happy to put carbuncles and all sorts of nonsense onto the waterfront area, if that was what they did, and I believe it was the wrong decision and it was spoiled. As I've said before, the Portlet headland is spoiled forever now. because those atrocities have been allowed to be built there. And something could have been built further back, of course. It didn't need to be right on the headland. And I think it's right to err to the side of caution on this. As Senator Moore had pointed out previously, this is an interim plan. And if it doesn't work, I'm not suggesting it wouldn't work, it can be revisited at a later date. And I think that's something we need to bear in mind with all the controversial amendments that might be coming up, is that once we've concreted over certain areas, once we've given the green light for irreversible development or the potential for that, it's very difficult to go back, and it shouldn't be done on the back of an interim plan. So more power to the constable's elbow, and certainly I know he has partial support. Certainly he has my full support, and if not from all of the members of his parish.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any of the members wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Yes, I call for the Minister to reply.
Sir, I just want to check. I think I may have got my procedure wrong. Can I say we're now dealing with the substantive vote on the amendment, my amendment, 87,
Yes,
amended by the Connie Tarb.
Yes, you're now making
And of course, the previous discussion rather threw me, because I can't see the references that the Deputy St Martin spoke about in those words about, views from buildings and so on. But nonetheless, I think, look, as it is, if it's just my amendment, plus our decision by a majority to go with the Constable's amendment, all it needs me to do, I think, is just to formally propose it, the amendment as amended, and ask for the appel, sir.
Thank you. The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are asked to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. Performance of the opportunity of voting, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the amendment as amended has been adopted. 33 votes pour and 2 votes contre.
Could we have the two, please, sir?
Yes.
The two are Senator Pallett and the Deputy of St Martin.
Now, the next item listed for debate is the 58th Amendment, lodged by the Connotab of St Bernard.
Sir, may I ask the Leader of the Assembly to withdraw this amendment? It's largely been superseded by the previous one.
Thank you. Thank you. The next is the 89th Amendment, lodged by the Minister for the Environment. There is a further amendment to that amendment lodged by the same Minister. Minister, subject to any objection, do you wish to have the amendment read subject to your amendment?
Sorry, sir, whose amendment am I agreeing to?
Well, your own amendment, which should be uncontroversial, at least to you.
You're sorry if I'm suffering from an overdose of
No, no.
amendments at the moment. moment.
You're right, there is an amendment.
So I'm happy to have my own incorporated.
Yes, yes. And do you accept that your amendment will be read without subparagraph D, because that has been in effect adopted by the 39th amendment proposed by Deputy Morell, which deals with conservation areas?
Thank you for clarifying that for me, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Greffio.
After the words "the Draft Island Plan 2022-25", insert the words "except that A, within the preamble to policy HE1, protect and listed buildings and places and their settings, after paragraph 2 on page 124, there should be inserted a new section 1 after paragraph 2 on page 124. Inclusive design. Everyone should be able to enjoy easy and exclusive access to the historic environment. Listed buildings and places may need to be modified to meet existing access needs, as well as the changing needs of occupants and users. Removing barriers to access can allow many more people to use and benefit from the historic environment. If sensitively designed, this need not compromise the ability of future generations to enjoy heritage and access these environments. Understanding the significance of a building is a vital first step in thinking about how much it can be changed to ensure sensitive interventions. In most cases, access can be improved without compromising the special interests of the historic buildings, and it is rare when nothing can be done to improve or facilitate access. By undertaking a careful process of research, consultation, and creative exploration of alternative good quality solutions are usually possible. The provision of improved access can be an important part of a sustainable approach to caring for the historic environment without compromising the significance of special places. 2. Substitute the last paragraph on page 125 with the following. In the case of demolition, in whole or in part, justification for this course of action might arise where a building is structurally unsound and is technically incapable of repair, or the demolition or partial demolition relates to a structure which detracts from the special interest of the listed building or place. In exceptional circumstances, there may be overriding public policy objectives related to the delivery of other government priorities, such as the provision of strategic infrastructure or compliance with specific policies of direct public benefit, for example, improving access for people with disability or sustainability, which would add weight to a proposal for partial or full demolition of a listed building or place. The weight given to heritage values in decision-making should be proportionate to the significance of the building or place and the impact of the proposed change in that significance, together with an assessment of the public benefit to be derived from a demolition proposal. The nature of the predicted public benefit should be clearly described and justified, and should set out how, when, and in what form the community will be expected to benefit directly from the proposed development relative to its impact on the historic environment. To ensure the protection of the island's historic environment, the wholesale loss of any listed building would require exceptional justification, where it can be demonstrated that public benefit outweighs harm, and where the nature of that benefit to the public is clear, direct, and evidenced. 3. Substitute the third paragraph on page 126 with the following. In cases where there is any approved alteration to or loss of historic built fabric from listed buildings or places, there will be a requirement for an appropriate level of recording and analysis to be undertaken, and subsequently publication including to the island's historic environment records. This may also include requirements, especially in the case of works affecting places of archaeological interest, relating to the treatment and care of archival material. In exceptional circumstances where it is proportionate, reasonable, and appropriate to do so, a form of mitigation could involve managed disassembly and reconstruction of a heritage asset on an alternative site. Any such requirements will be secured through planning condition or obligation attached to any such permission. Paragraph B. In policy HE1, 1, the fourth paragraph should be replaced with the following. Proposals that do not protect a listed building or place or its setting will not be supported unless and with regard to the comparative significance of the listed building or place or its setting and the impact of proposed development on that significance. 2, at the end of C, after the words reasonably practicable, replace the word or with the word and. 3, at the end of D, after the words in its setting, add, and where the nature of that benefit to the public is clear, direct, and evidenced. C, in policy HE2, 1, for the first paragraph there should be substituted historic windows and doors and listed buildings or buildings in the conservation area which are of significance or special interest, or which contribute to the character of the conservation area, should be repaired using materials and detail and to match the existing. Proposals for the replacement of modern glazing in historic windows with double glazing will be supported where it can be accommodated. A, within the existing window or door joinery frames, or B, within a like-for-like frame. 2, in the third paragraph, the words or the character of a building in a conservation area should be deleted. 3, a new fourth paragraph should be inserted in as follows: where proposals for the replacement of windows and doors in conservation areas will affect the character and appearance of the conservation area, they will only be supported where they protect or improve that character or appearance. 4, in the first sentence of the existing paragraph 4, the word more should be deleted from before modern windows. The words or buildings in a conservation area should be removed, and the word and should replace or at the end of the second line. 5, a second sentence should be inserted at the end of the existing fifth paragraph as follows: the use of double glazing in replacement windows and glazing in doors will therefore be supported where replacements replicate the historic window and doors as far as practicable, helping to meet Jersey's commitment to energy efficiency. Paragraph D not read. Paragraph E, within the preamble to policy HE3, protection or improvement of conservation areas, a new sentence should be inserted at the end of the last paragraph on page 133. This does not preclude high-quality modern design of buildings or spaces within the area, rather it seeks a contextual response to fit the place. F, the draft Bridge and Island Plan 2022-25 be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of B2 and 3, specifically Policy HE3, protection or improvement of conservation areas, Policy HE5, conservation of archaeological heritage, Policy NE1, protection and improvement of biodiversity and geodiversity, and Policy NE3, landscape and seascape character and their associated preambles.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think when we started this debate, I said that the debate we had on the marine park and protection zones was probably the most complicated. Unfortunately, sir, my preparation on this item hadn't fully estimated the complexity of this one. So I'm going to try to unravel this for members. Members will know is after the expiry of the cut-off date for members' amendments, that's the second round of amendments, after we'd had the inspector's report and I'd circulated my views and intentions on it, that I went through with the officers what I call consolidated amendments, and this is one, Amendment 89, where I attempted to deal with things where I thought, in the interest of finding a consensus and reducing the need for having a laborious, difficult debate, because historic buildings is always difficult, that I would try and get to that point. I almost made it, I think. I have more to say in a minute. So looking at the proposition as on the as lodged in its unamended form, first, paragraph A is basically adopting the proposals in the amendment from Deputy Ina Gardner about inclusive design and inclusion and relating to persons of disability. So that is where that material has come from, word for word. So that has been adopted in A. In paragraphs B, the inspector considered representations. In fact, there was a lot of representations on historic buildings policies, HE1, at the inquiry. Having listened to the playback myself, I recall that the Jersey Societe representative spoke strongly in favour. The National Trust for Jersey spoke strongly in favour. Local architects spoke strongly in favour. And also one local planning practice also spoke strongly in favour of HE1 as we are in the draft plan. And so there was a very, very substantial body of support for the draft in the plan. It therefore is a surprise to me that policy HE1 in fact is subject to a later amendment, which once we've dealt with these ones just now, we are going to have to deal with, which is an amendment which seeks to put a line through policy HE1 and do something completely different. But what I've done in paragraph B of this proposition is to adopt what the inspector's recommendation was, that we should just do a short change into that part of that policy, which is to come from the inspector's report. Similarly, the inspector had things to say about windows and doors on policy H2, and also, and that's in paragraph C of the amended, the original my proposition, and paragraph also the lower Romans 2 and 3 in relate to Romans 2, 3, 4, and 5. No, sorry, 2, 3, and 4 all relate to what the planning inspector thought there should be references as well. Now, paragraph 5 was put forward in response to Deputy Hewlin's amendment, which is, we will of course be going on to discuss that. He's the first amendment to mine. And that was in my hope that I would be able to meet Deputy Hewlin's aspiration for double glazing and replacement windows. And so we will obviously need to talk about that when Deputy Hewlin makes his change to do something different. And then on item D in my proposition is about conservation area designations, which adopts the recommendations included by the Deputy Morell in his amendment about how we should approach conservation areas. And the last one, point E, was a submission by Jersey Architects that thought we should just have this reference to design in there as well. So you can see this is a real attempt to find a solution to avoid a really complex and difficult debate. It's clear that I have failed to achieve that. But there we are. I'll do my best from now. The second amendment, because obviously the first amendment, Deputy Hewlin got in quick with his first amendments. So my second amendment, that is and obviously I've proposed that as amended by my amendment, which is the second amendment, was my further attempt to try and respond to Deputy Russell Labby's amendment, which is coming on later, which I see Deputy is not in the chamber, so I don't know what his intentions are. And it would be my hope at this late stage still that further adjustment, which was made to go as, to do everything we can to try and bridge that gap. So that's the history of it. I think I'm going to listen to the debate now. I suppose I should talk generally about, historic buildings, in my view, are absolutely important. We have lost far too many. I can tell you that since the last island plan, we have lost 17 listed buildings. So when the question arises, how well do the current policies work, then I think that tells a lot. We also have a very, very, I think, visionary project being led by Deputy of Grouville about island identity. And the truth is that the pressures to development do erode the visual evidence of island identity and our history. And I think we do need policies in place to look after it. And I know that not everybody shares that view. There are difficult judgments to make. And therefore, this is absolutely a case that we need the very best of policies that are as structured as they can be to make these judgments. And of course, we're very lucky. And I would put I'd make a mention now. We have planning officers in the room. I've asked for our historic building specialist to be available. So she is in the room, and if you want to ask independent questions of her, please do so. She is not there speaking on behalf of me. She will give you, because everybody knows her advice is robust and strong, and is not there somebody who just goes with what she's asked to do. And I'm certainly wouldn't even think about that. And of course, I do know as well that this area it's extremely difficult. In my time that I've been associated with the States, the States has sadly lost 2 previous historic building officers because they came under pressure to reduce their advice and so on. That's the history. It's very high, it's a high stress role. So I ask members, please be careful with this. There's no perfect way through this. We have to be able to change. We have to be able to accommodate change. But the wording of policies matters, because it gives the planning committee, it gives planning inspectors, and it gives the persons deciding an appeal, and if necessary, the courts, the rules in which those judgments can be made. I think that's probably the high-level approach to my amendment, sir, and I'm sure I'll be coming back and speaking on what follows an amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There's an amendment to the amendment lodged by Deputy St Peter, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 2, paragraph C, in subparagraph B of the substitute paragraph in policy HE2, delete the words where the existing frame is beyond repair.
Deputy St Peter.
Thank you very much, sir. Two declarations of interest. One, I'm a very proud owner of a heritage property, which I do whatever I can to preserve in its best possible style. There are many hurdles to that, which I have accommodated at every single stage out of respect to those properties. My other declaration of interest is there are obviously sash windows within this property, and I have extraordinarily, some of the windows are new double glazed windows, and in the same building there are some that are original, I believe, 1853 single glazed windows. The photographs you see in my amendment are from my house, so that's my declaration of interest, and they're all but side by side. A financial interest I have to declare, I estimate, because this proposition or my amendment is supporting the highest quality hardwood sash windows, means that any savings that I would make on heating will be gained when I am long gone from this planet. So this is about the right thing to do in maintaining a house, and for the other 3,000 similar houses like this in the island, and the joiners and the architects who are very supportive of me in doing this, that is what it's about. But I make that declaration of interest. Firstly, I have to thank the Minister for accepting, should we say, going halfway in my original amendment P14. And that meant, he said, we could replace the double glazing on the heritage properties. As we know, windows are in two parts. There is the sash window, and there are the frames, both in the doors and the windows. It is the frames, the replacement of frames, that are not beyond repair. That is the purpose of this amendment. Previous to this, any window needed to be beyond repair, or beyond reasonable repair, before approval for double glazing would be accepted. So far, halfway through, the window can be replaced without being beyond repair. It is the frames that I'm talking about today. Obviously, there are exceptions, and I totally respect their exceptions. A typical example is stained glass windows in churches. I mean, that is extreme, but that means that I'm totally cognizant and respectful of those exceptions. Now, I'm sure you've read the submission from the joiners and architects, etc. It's quite a technical subject. I did do a bit of glazing over, but it's really, really very informative. And the summary of it is this is just common sense. So I'm going to assume, for the sake of this, sir, that members would accept the thermal efficiency benefit as we drive towards carbon neutrality. If you wish me to cover that, I will. The challenge we have, down to the detail, is double glazed windows. The modern double glazed windows, with the new technology that's involved in them, are ever so slightly heavier and ever so slightly thicker than the original frames, which could be, as in my case, I don't have any evidence of it, but many are well over 100 years old. And those new frames need to be accommodated the original frames need to accommodate the new actual sash windows, being slightly bigger and slightly heavier. Therefore, the old windows, the old frames, have to be changed, removed from the position, the counterbalances are slightly bigger. So it just basically means that they will just not fit. So the old frames have to accommodate the new, the new windows. Also, the preparation of the existing frames will never be as efficient as bespoke frames that are designed to work hand in glove with the windows that they are going to support. So they will never work efficiently or be as thermally efficiently as we would like. And the other thing about the old frames is, by definition, they sit next door to the walls. You know, they're built into the wall of the house, and these are pre-cavity walls. And I assure you, find me a good Jersey cod house or heritage property in this island that isn't damp, and you know, I'll be delighted to buy you a drink. There's no such thing. But the window frames obviously are attached to the walls, which is damp. Therefore, they need to have an updated damp-proof course. Now, the joiners are telling me that when they do take out a frame in order to repair it, they collapse and fall away. You've got to take it out to replace the damp-proof course, but you've also got to take it out to do the repairs back in the joinery shop. And they previously just collapse. So they're not really practical. I have been told by for joiners who look at sort of the reasonable lifestyle or lifespan of the frames and the windows, that they could be up to 1.5 times more expensive to maintain as opposed to just replace. Now, you know, for most people, I mean, that a lot of people who have a privilege to have a heritage property, yes, it's a lot of money, but they can't all afford to do that. So we need to help them to make it more economical, if we can, in order to protect their properties in a style that we want. And they can't be indefinitely repaired. The aesthetics go after a period of time. You can see it. They start to look worse than a new window. I'm like, I can carry on, sir, but I just ask members to support this. I recognise the desire to protect our heritage. However, just looking at, this is just common and practical sense for the protection and the aesthetics of our treasured historic properties. Thank you, sir. Sorry, sir, I move the amendment.
Is this seconded? Yes, thank you. Who wishes to speak on this?
Sir, before anybody speaks, should anyone with heritage windows make a declaration in this debate?
I don't think that's necessary. Yes. Who wishes to speak on this amendment to the amendment? Conor Thompson-Brillard.
Thank you, sir. I rise to speak on this as a result of representation from a historic architect, and to put his concerns through. He feels it's a blunt instrument to achieve what I understand the deputy is trying to achieve, and I suppose could allude to a bit of conflict in that I have a building with 18th century windows which all need replacing, and a parish hall full of them, albeit 19th century. The amendment he suggests might inadvertently result in the loss of historically significant, important and rare parts of our cultural heritage. How are 17th, early and mid 18th and early 19th and rare examples of later 19th and even 20th century windows protected? It cites a background paper from a joinery manufacturer who might be, of course, more interested in actually selling new windows than repairing old ones. It certainly, I think there are two different skills, truthfully. There's an awful lot of work in repairing an old window, and I can understand a leaning towards replacement from a business point of view. There is a suggestion that the Victorian, being 1837 to 1901 windows, are made of poor quality timber. This isn't borne out by the facts that old windows are usually made of higher quality timber than those of the second half of the 20th century, which often fail after only 30 or 50 years. Those of, say, 1770 or 1820 have lasted for some 250 or 200 years already. This tells you everything you need to know about the quality of the window, and I know that the Deputy refers in his paper to pitch pine from North America, and I think I can vouch that some of my better windows are in fact made of pitch pine, albeit a couple of hundred years old. There is always a case for replacement when wood is beyond repair. The Bridging Island Plan proposals allow for that. We're trying to reduce CO2 by generally, certainly by 2030, and get our net zero by 2030. Manufacturing and importing building materials to make these new windows creates CO2. And I was trying to find, before speaking, what the CO2 impact of using timbers such as Accoya, which is popular amongst window manufacturers, is at the moment, because it is effectively has an impregnation process to make it last longer. And I'm not sure, I'd like to be clear, maybe the Deputy can clear up later on whether that is better for the net zero process than just using conventional timbers. While secondary glazing shows far cheaper than a complete new window, about 20 to 25% of the cost, it will, of course, save energy in the same way. The amendment claims that the methods proposed in the British Island Plan, including secondary glazing, are ineffective, and this is demonstrably untrue. Approximately 6% of buildings, I'm advised, in Jersey are listed, some 3,000. We should be retrofitting unlisted traditional buildings, approximately 30 of the building stock in Jersey, 15,000 which quantify those, to have a greater impact of reducing CO2. So I'm empathetic to what the Deputy proposes, but I think we need to be cognizant of the effects of so doing.
Thank you, Brian Tarr. Minister.
Thank you, sir. The policy as submitted in the draft plan that's been reviewed by the inspector and supported my list adds to the names here, Association of Jersey Architects as well, the National Trust and so on. It does. We have made a very significant change, which is new, which does allow for the retrofitting of double glazing within existing window and door frames, and that will allow the enhancement of performance. But of course the key question is whether you replace the whole window or not. And I think basically as a layman, I'm not an expert in these, I listen to advice. I've also seen the evidence of my own eyes that where you get windows replaced that don't look the same aesthetically. Or, you might get a very high quality one, but that is, in my experience, from what I've seen, unusual. But I think the Deputy's amendment wants to say, no, I don't want that test to where the existing frames are beyond repair. So it seems to be quite a reasonable approach in the draft policy, bringing in a new change, reflecting a new situation. If the thermal performance and sound performance needs to be improved, you can put them in within the structure. And the advice I've given, I think members have seen, I don't know if you all had a chance to read all of the technical information that our historic buildings expert has circulated, that this is very possible. In fact, what we need to do is just set that direction as a principle. And of course, it will deal with, generally speaking, it applies to listed buildings. And, what features are important. So, for example, when we are bringing forward proposals, we're going to be having this debate on the 27th of April about implementing the long-standing commitment in previous island plans to have conservation areas. And of course, the doors and windows on elevations that face the road and face people, it's almost like the eyes of a human being. You could, the face. It sends you the signals, whereas you could see if something is false and, pastiche or what have you. And that brings into question whether it's worth saving the building if you undermine its historical integrity in that way. And I myself, my personal view is that I don't own a historic building. I aspire to, I'd love to. I don't have listed buildings. Listed windows, I've got modern ones that don't work very well either. So they need replacing. because we live in a high energy environment, and wet winters and all the rest of it. So I think there's a duty if one takes on, or whether one inherits a building of that nature, to pass it on as best one can. And yes, it needs to adapt, but I think the policies, we got that. I think the draft policy as it's drafted gets it right. And therefore, I got the technical advice and members can read. I don't know if we've all been able to look at it. And of course, it's often argued that we've got too many listed buildings. Look, really. Look, we have a wealth of heritage in Jersey, a wealth of it. We are lucky. We should celebrate it, look after it. Now, there is a real point that I do go with the Deputy in. It's morally wrong, I think, that for years the budgets of the departments that look after have to make these decisions have withdrawn all funding to support the owners of listed buildings. That's unacceptable. And I make a plea, the next Council of Ministers, particularly as we bring in conservation areas, we should restore the cuts that were made several years ago to remove those budgets. They were relatively modest, and they weren't just dished out to everybody, wealthy people and so on. They were dished out to people with very modest means as a limited amount of money, just help them do things where, for example, they could not do so. So I understand the Deputy's frustration, perhaps annoyance. Don't know. And yes, there are things that we need to deal with. But if we protect the windows and so on that face the roads, I can tell you now that one of the early drafts I've asked to be drawn up for conservation area rules is the windows that face onto the street that are subject to those controls. Not the ones at the back, the ones that nobody sees, very different. This is about recognising our island to try that people can still enjoy. And I have seen the effects of damaging window replacements. I certainly have seen it in town, plastic windows, we're going through all that kind of thing. So once you lose the fabric of the window, I think this idea that the policy, what the amendment says is that take out the words where the existing frame is beyond repair. So in other words, even if it's quite repairable, no, I can't support that. I ask members, please, to reject the amendment and go with the amendment that I have brought, which tries to move halfway towards members to try and achieve that balance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir. And I apologise for not being in the chamber. I only found out late yesterday that the constable of St John had contracted COVID, and I went to his presentation on Saturday, so I'm just playing careful. Sir, at the appropriate time, I should advise you that I would like to seek the leave of the Assembly to withdraw the 74th Amendment, which sought to effectively reinstate the previous HE1. I'm sorry for the late announcement of this, especially if members had prepared speeches. But our conversations, our negotiations, if you like, on the 74th Amendment were quite late in the day. However, I appreciate how busy the officers were and the Minister, and I appreciate the movement that is represented by the amendment of the Minister. And I came to the decision this morning that actually it comes down to one word, really, the word must. And I'm grateful to the officer for helping me with this and pointing this out, that the new policy says that listed buildings and their settings must be protected over the old policy, which says there will be a presumption against any destruction of or replacement of a listed building. So the Minister shouldn't be too hard on himself, because I don't believe he has failed. I think we are making strides in the right direction and not before time. So I thank him for that. And I look forward to a new era of protecting our identity, the island's identity, the historic environment, which I fought for since I've been in this assembly and before. And so I'm prepared and happy to give the new policy a go after speaking to all those involved and also heritage groups. And let's do better. Let's apply this new policy consistently and evenly, which didn't happen with the last one, so that we back up our historic environment officer when she has strong objections, and we hold the line. So I think this amendment now is good. The Minister's amendment is really good news, and I'm happy to withdraw the 75th amendment when you call upon me to do so, or ask the Assembly if I can do that. This second amendment of Deputy Hewlin is, however, a complete disaster. This is taking us back decades, and it is worth reminding ourselves of the Historic Environment Officer's words here, that if the Deputy's proposed amendment to the Minister's amendment is accepted, this will result in the loss of the remaining historic window frames in their entirety throughout the island in response to the proposals for double glazing. This loss of historic fabric and detailing and change in appearance is likely to reduce the significance of the windows and the host building, and irrevocably alter the character and quality of the island's historic environment. The Minister is absolutely right in his analogy of the face. To remove the original windows and doors from historic buildings is like poking the eyes out of a face. It's like a face without eyes. And it does huge damage. Imagine if such a proposal were to be considered in Edinburgh or Bath or London or York or Chester or anywhere where their historic buildings are. It has the potential to wreak absolute havoc. And I know that Deputy Hewlin's had trouble with his own renovations, but he can't come to this from that singular point of view. I'm sorry that he didn't consult with the Historic Environment Officer. I know he probably didn't want to do that because he would have been told something he didn't want to hear. That this is really, really dangerous, and I hope members will throw it out. Some of the planning applications that we spend an awful lot of time on and are the most difficult are sometimes those that are just to do with the replacement of one window. And what we have done traditionally over the course of the last of this planning committee and the previous incarnation under Constable Galashaw, former Constable Galashaw, is we have held the line with the Historic Environment Officer. And I would like to see, and we have had to turn these replacements down. And I would like to see if people are disadvantaged financially by having to keep their or replace identically their historic windows in historic buildings. I'd like to see a fund to help those who are struggling financially to actually help them do it. But it's unfortunately a responsibility that comes with owning a lovely historic building. It would be easy to swipe this away, but the consequences are truly disastrous for our historic environment, the Jersey identity. So please urge members not to go there.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Sadia.
Thank you, sir. So I won't repeat what's been said by previous speaker or indeed the Constable of St. Brelard, who read out or referred certainly extensively to some correspondence that some of us have had, and I think that expert opinion provides a stark contrast to I think the concerns that the Deputy of St. Peter has raised, which I think has to be said, are probably have some sympathy with some members of the public. But I will lay down a further challenge to the Minister and to the government, whoever that is in the future, and I'm glad that the Minister's already touched on it, but only part of what I was going to say is that it seems to me we play into the hands, or those of us who want to preserve Jersey's heritage in terms of historic buildings, the government plays into the hands of those who want to call for such things as putting in PVC double glazing, because it doesn't properly maintain and regulate the historic environment anyway. So I put a valid question there. If you're walking down a country lane or a town street, and I've done that today, in fact, Deputy Hewlin will know very well my usual route where I walk the dog, and you walk past a particular building, it could be anywhere, and you look at it and it's got old dilapidated wooden windows with glass just about hanging in there and the paint flaking off, and you think to yourself, well, I don't know about in this particular case, I'm sure the person in that big house is not short of a bob or two. They could afford to do it. What are they waiting for? That may or may not be the case, of course. It could well be that somebody has inherited a house and doesn't have the means to do up the building, and then finds out that they're not allowed to do certain things, so they might be able to afford to replace the windows when they get that tap on the door from the double glazing salesperson, and say, yeah, I'd like to sign up. Oh no, you can't do that, I'm afraid. But at the same time, the Environment Department doesn't ask people to maintain their buildings. So which is it? Are these buildings truly valuable to the public, and are they things which we expect people to maintain? And do we just do that on trust? And do we do that on trust even if the individuals don't have the financial means to do that? And even if they do have the financial means to do it, what if they just don't have the interest, can't be bothered? If it's an outhouse, if it's a shed, why would they spend money fixing it if it's of no commercial interest to them? And I think that two-way relationship needs to be strengthened. The department, I imagine, has been seen by some as just a stick to beat people with. Oh, you've got a historic building, and for some it might be considered a benefit to live somewhere like that, or to have part of their property which is listed, but others probably see that understandably as a liability for which they'll get little aid. Now, I have to contextualise that I know that the department do go out of their way to help people, and they're very approachable. But I go back to the point, and this isn't just about listed buildings, it's about the built environment. It can be said about greenhouses, it can be said about walls that are falling down in our various communities. And if we have the laws there, and if the minister has the laws, or he has got delegated laws to his officers within the department, and none of this is ever enforced, that's what needs to start happening. Somebody needs to get a knock on the door and say, look, I've noticed you own this beautiful building and you've let it go to rack and ruin. And not only do you have a moral responsibility to fix it, you've got a legal responsibility to fix it. And then start to have that conversation. And if they say, well, I don't have the money to do it, then you make sure that there is a fund that's been set up, a heritage fund. And you say, well, did you know that if you need it, there's a means-tested fund which you can apply to, and we'll help you do this, and we can recommend certain architects, or that there's a list of architects who can do that for you. At the moment, we've got the worst of both worlds, where we are forcing people to do something with their own property, which they may not reasonably be able to do, but at the same time, we're not providing any help, and we're not providing any enforcement. So you get dilapidated old historic buildings that look terrible, but which we've ticked a box for on paper to say, well, actually, it's not our fault, but if you do want to repair your building, you have to do it in a certain way. Because I know that there are so many out there who would probably prefer to see an old building with PVC windows that looks good, rather than a dilapidated old historic building with sorry wooden-looking windows where the panes are falling out and the paint is stripping off. But that's a false dichotomy that we should not be led into. But I do put that challenge back to the Minister in summing up. Or rather, he's not summing up, is he? At some point he will, but whoever it is to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. So an environment minister in some jurisdiction owned a very old car, and he loved this old car. It burnt, the engine was pretty terrible, and it emitted smoke and fumes and all sorts of stuff, and it was a bit rusty, but he loved it. But one day he became convinced that he needed to save carbon and he needed to do a better job for the environment. He went to his mechanic and he said, I've made significant change here. I've decided to go halfway and I've bought an environmentally friendly engine to go in my old car. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to save carbon. And the engineer looked at the two and he said, yep, you're absolutely right. But the problem you've got is that just by a couple of millimetres, this engine is not going to fit in the engine bay. And what you're going to need to do is do some modifications to the engine bay, and then your whole car will be transformed and you can save all this carbon. I think members will know where I'm going to, sir. The Minister has said he has made significant changes to windows and doors. The problem is you can't always fit a double glazed window into a frame that's not made for a double glazed window, any more than you can fit an environmentally friendly engine always into an old chassis. It sometimes just doesn't fit. And I want members to think about that, because if we are going to get this, we're talking millimetres here. It could be the engine in the engine bay, but we're talking literally a small number of millimetres to make the difference. But if you can't make the difference, you can't fit the double glazed window, and that's the important thing. If we're going to be serious about saving carbon, we all know the most difficult buildings in Jersey to heat are the old Jersey traditional granite buildings. We've all got it. I've tried my best to see if I can convert mine to electric. From oil-fired, it's really difficult. We've got to find ways to save the carbon escaping from these buildings, and windows are one way. Before I sit down, sir, I would like to say that I've always been very much against internal glazing and internal shutters, and more recently I have been very much convinced by internal shutters, which look good, they're very smart, and they do a fantastic job of saving heat escaping from the house. But let's get back to the amendment here. I think we need to be careful. It's great saying we're going to allow double glazed wooden windows, and you can't tell the difference from more than 10 feet away. But really careful, because if we can't fit those, in many cases you won't be able to fit those windows into the existing frame, which is why I think I'm going to support the Deputy St Peter on this one.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Picking up from Deputy St Martin, Deputy St Martin has a really good point. The trouble is that Deputy St Peter's amendment doesn't address that point. The Deputy of St Peter's amendment doesn't say, but where double glazing cannot be fitted into the frame, then exceptions can be made. It doesn't say that at all. The Deputy of St Peter's amendment just says delete the words where the frame is beyond repair. So the Deputy of St Peter's amendment is absolutely 100% carte blanche just to rip out windows, historic windows. That's what his amendment does. If he had brought a more refined amendment, I would have been absolutely fine and happy to support such a refined amendment, because I absolutely agree that in a world where we are trying to be more environmentally friendly, a lot of these old buildings are, as Deputy St Martin said, oil-fired heating, and they are difficult to convert. So it has always been, as someone who once lived in Almora Crescent with very large single-pane double-glazed windows at the front, I knew how that they just let the heat in and out. Or they didn't keep the heat in, they just let it out. And so I see the problem. I've lived with that problem. Had I paid more attention perhaps to all the amendments coming through, I may have amended the Deputy St Peter's amendment a bit further to refine it the way it needs to be refined. But unfortunately, his amendment is carte blanche, just to say, sorry, I want to change these windows, don't like them anymore, and I'm just going to put them in. And there is value in the actual original, not in every single instance, but there is often value in the original fixtures and the original frames. And I keep thinking about not Jersey farmhouses, but I keep thinking about in town. I can't think of the proper phrase, but for the curved windows that form a part of many buildings, historic buildings in town. Thank you. But no, not the bay windows in the English style, but they're just a single pane of curved glass which goes across, and you'll see them throughout in town on corners usually. And they are incredible. But of course, there is no such thing in a modern set of windows. Nobody bends the glass to fit into a modern... Modern standards do not allow you to do that. And so in those cases, this is an entirely innovative way of Jersey building. It's incredibly idiosyncratic. And I believe that according to the Deputy of St Peter's Amendment, people would just be able to remove them. And that would be appalling. And so I hear what the Deputy of St Martin is saying, but I cannot support that position. The Deputy of St Peter's Amendment, whilst the Deputy of St Martin is saying the Environment Minister is not going far enough and is perhaps causing problems where, in theory, it's possible to change the windows, but the reality is you won't be able to because of a couple of millimetres. The trouble is that the Deputy of St Peter's Amendment goes far, far too far and just gives permission to remove window frames and historic windows left, right and centre. I don't think that's his intention, but I think that is exactly what happens. So I really do, for the sake of many window frames in Jersey, historic window frames in Jersey, and particularly those which are unique to this island, that you don't find them elsewhere on the planet, as far as I understand. Please reject this amendment to the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Yes, Conrad St Martin.
Thank you, sir. If we adopt the... Oh, stand up. Yes, sorry. If we adopt the Deputy of St Peter's Amendment, the damage this will cause will be far-reaching. This is not just about replacing a few windows. I'd go as far as to say that it may be vandalising our heritage. Double glazing, to put plastic double glazing in to save energy, is not really required in heritage buildings. You can actually use secondary glazing, which is far cheaper than a complete new window and is energy efficient. And I'll also agree with the Deputy of St Peter the Deputy of St Martin that internal shutters also keep the heat, and I have those at home. PVC windows just do not look good in an old building, and I disagree as well. You can see from 10 feet away that it's a plastic window. They look awful. I think Deputy Labby said that we may be able to help people with some sort of fund to keep wooden windows in situ. I would just urge people not to vote for this. It is destroying our heritage. I know that the Deputy of St Peter wouldn't have been his mission, but and much of my speech was actually said by the Deputy of St Brillard. So I just really urge members not to vote for this. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I basically endorse what the Deputy of St Martin said, and this is the root of the problem, that I confess I have an interest here. I recently did apply to have windows basically replaced. We eventually came to an accommodation with the Historic Buildings Officer, but the main point was this, that we were, and a member of my family particularly, is obsessive about energy conservation. We cannot have the degree of energy efficiency we want within the windows, because within the framework of the windows. So it's a stark contrast to observe this to the letter of the law. We are going to be prejudicing our ability to conserve energy because we are not allowed to, and as the Deputy of St Maurice says, by a tune of 1 or 2 millimetres, be able to amend the window frame. I take Deputy Merrill's point. I'm not sure that the Deputy Peters amendment quite hits the spot, and I blame myself for not having followed this before. But I'm also slightly confused because there is a, if in there's so many amendments going around, forgive me, but there is a additional sentence to be added somewhere which which says the use of double glazing in replacement windows and glazing indoors will therefore be supported where replacements replicate the historic window and doors as far as practicable, helping to meet Jersey's commitment to energy efficiency. And taking that in isolation, it seems there is perhaps mileage the idea that the Historic Buildings Officer can be more accommodating, and I simply throw that out as to for future reference. But I very reluctantly, I perhaps cannot support the Deputy Speaker's amendment, but I fully endorse what the Deputy of St Martin is trying to say, is that we have a conflict in the rules as are between energy efficiency and maintaining of windows, and if we can arrive at a situation where new windows, to all intents and purposes, look identical to the other ones, why should we not move in that direction? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardiner.
Thank you, sir. I'm a bit, now I got probably unexpectedly in different space with this amendment, because when I read the amendment, and I'm pleased to follow Deputy of St Mary, I thought about double glazing. And for me, double glazing is energy efficient house. When I'm thinking about my constituencies who live, for example, around Rouge Bouillon area, that need to spend substantial amount of their not always high income for the heating, or to choose to be in the cold house. Double glazing can definitely save their heating bills and make their home more energy efficient and better to live in. Now, if members have in front of them the proposition on the page 3, if you can open the link, there are 2 windows. And when I looked at the windows, I didn't maybe read all necessary details. I didn't think about PVC and different types of window, what will be replaced. It's also not specified in the proposition that it will be replaced with plastics. So I would like Deputy of St. Peter in his closing speech to clarify, would it be a replacement that would look like original, I mean, would it be windows, somebody else would make this point, or it will be plastic windows which are completely not connected to the building? Because for me, it's important to keep the heritage buildings. It's important to keep this look that we will have the same feeling. At the same time, we need to care about the people who live in these buildings. So I will listen to the summing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. No member wishes to speak. I call upon the Deputy to reply.
Thank you all. Can I just make sure something is absolutely clear? There's no way, sorry, the Minister has accepted that the windows can be replaced with double glazed windows regardless of the condition. So a lot of members have mentioned in their speeches of ripping out windows. That's not correct. That has been accepted by the Minister, that as we try to go towards carbon neutrality by 2030, and I've written down here, I can't remember, I think it's a supermarket chain in the UK that says every little bit helps, or every little bit matters. This is one of those things. If we're going to go towards carbon neutrality, we've accepted the fact that double glazing works, is essential within heritage properties. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, as Deputy Luce eloquently, perfectly described, the fit between the double glazing and the frames that those double glazing will sit on. That is what we're talking about. We're not talking about ripping it out. We're not talking about sort of everything wholesale assassination. And I can say to Deputy Gardiner, there's no, the frames will be like for like compatible with the windows that the Minister has accepted. There's no mentions of PVC or plastic anywhere. In fact, there's quite a few heritage properties that before the heritage laws came in to protect the windows have got plastic PVC heritage out there. And those owners are particularly happy at the moment. They've got nice warm houses, they involve absolutely no maintenance, but I think they're ghastly to have the plastic there. I think that really has gone against the heritage of the buildings that we're trying to protect. And if those certain friends are listening now, I will not withdraw that comment. I don't know the answer. Oh, the Constable from Brallard's gone. I don't know the answer about whether Koya wood is going to be more carbon neutral than other wood. The Minister talked about inherited properties. We have a challenge here because I admit I inherited the property from my father. It wasn't a long-term family. He'd only been in the family since about 1964 or something like that. And when we moved back to Jersey, with the intent was to restore this property, I was gobsmacked at the hoops you have to jump through to look after a property. And thermally, making it warm isn't just windows. It is full insulation and across all the ceilings. The ceilings between the ceilings need to be insulated. If you've got plaster and lather in your ceiling, you can't get access to those ceilings. So there's no protection of insulation. You can't put thermal boarding on the walls of a heritage property, okay, because it affects the proportions of the room. Okay, you can't put thermal boarding. So all these old windows, I've got walls, they've got cavity walls, they're thick and they are damp. Lots of them have got damp on the inside when you warm them too much, condensation, which we're not allowed. They have that, you can't do anything about it, you can't protect it. We put, I know lots of other people have put underfloor heating in. And underfloor, in the heritage properties, if you've got wide floorboards, that wide floorboards, you're not allowed to replace them, which is fair and reasonable. They don't get seen from 50 years to 50 years, and only get seen when the carpets are changed, but you have to protect them. The only way to put underfloor heating in is to put the underfloor heating on top of the thermal boards. It's only about an inch thick, but it changes the proportions of the room. There's another conflict for you. You can't change the profile of the room with thermal boarding, but you can by putting underfloor heating in. So I just say I'm privileged and I'm honoured to have inherited a heritage property, and my wife and I spend an enormous amount of time doing what we can for it. But let me assure you, it's a labour of love. Another point is I walk around the parishes and it comes up on every single debate about empty properties, and Deputy Tadia mentioned that. The majority of empty properties I see are potentially wonderful. I don't know if they're heritage or not. I haven't checked each individual one. Small farmhouses that you see in little pockets around the parishes. We have to answer the question, why are they being left to rack and ruin? I don't know. One of the reasons I would say is the owners haven't got the stomach or the desire or the pockets in order to bring them back to their former glory. So I think Deputy Taddy's got a very good point there in that we need to work with heritage and he mentioned the flaking off windows in the area. I would say that the Jerseyman that owns the Jersey property is playing the long game here and waiting for those windows to collapse until he can get his necessary permissions, because they are beyond repair. I mean, Deputy Labby spoke as if he's the heritage officer, and he used the words removal of windows and doors. It's as if, I'm sorry, Deputy Labby, dear friend, I'm sorry, but as if you haven't read the proposition. The removal of the windows and doors have been accepted by the Minister. This is amendment is purely for the frames that it's going in. I think I have, mostly covered that. I think people have had enough of me. In summary, the windows have been accepted. We can replace them with hardwood sash windows. All I'm asking, as Deputy Luce explained very, very clearly, is that the window and the frame are built together, installed together in harmony, and designed to live and operate and work together. There's no intent here of ripping out and destroying our heritage. It's purely a practical solution to a problem we're all facing of carbon neutrality etc. Purely a practical decision. And I urge you all to support me in this. Thank you, sir.
The bill's been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link may cast their votes in the chat channel, and I invite the greffier to open the voting to members in the chamber. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the amendment has been rejected. 16 votes for, 23 votes contra, and 2 abstentions. And there's been a request to read out.
So can we have the contras and the abstentions, please?
There's a request to read out the pause, the contras, and the abstentions in the chat.
So those members who voted pour, beginning with the chamber, Constables of Grouville and St Peter, Deputies Lewis, Pinnell, St Martin, St Juan, St Mary, Ash, St Peter. And in the chat, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Wickenden, Senator Ferguson, Deputy Doublé, Deputy Martin, Senator Gorst, and the Deputy of Trinity. Those members who voted contra were Senators Farnham, Moore, Mezek, Constables of St Helier, St Lawrence, St Brelard, St Martin, St Clement, and Deputies Southern, Young, Morel, Guida, Lahegre, IA Ward, and the deputies of Deputy St John, Deputy Labby, Constable of St Saviour, Deputy Tadier, Constable of St John, Deputy Truscott, Deputy of Greville, Deputy Pamplin, and the abstentions were Deputy Gardner and the Constable of St Juan.
Thank you. The 74th Amendment has been withdrawn.
We've got to do the 89th amendment.
Oh, forgive me, sorry, I've gone too far. We would go back, of course, to the amendment as amended. Who wishes to speak on the 89th Amendment as amended? Yes, Deputy Morel.
Sorry, sir. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say specifically, let me just find my place, because I was thinking the Minister would have to speak first, but of course the Minister's already spoken. I apologise. Specifically about the area in the 89th Amendment, which is to do with conservation area designations, which is Part D of the amendment. And in case any members were as concerned about conservation area designations as I was, it's just to say that having kind of looked word for word at the paragraph D in the Minister's amendment versus the amendment that I have brought, I'm satisfied that there is only one small change, and it's one that I'm more than happy with, which is actually to prioritise St Helier and the historic areas of St Helier as conservation area designations. From the rest of it, it is pretty much word for word the amendment that I was bringing. And so really I wanted to say that from my perspective, I'm happy to support the 89th Amendment because the part which affects the amendment I brought is in good order and doesn't seem to be finding any loopholes around my amendment. If people would like to know why conservation area designations are important, it's quite simply, the first instance is that conservation area designations, as the Minister said yesterday, are meant to have been in island planning policy for 30 years, and they haven't been. And so they were first mentioned 30 years ago, and it was said the Minister, or not the Minister, the committee of the time, will bring in conservation area designations, and then nothing happened. Tumbleweed crossed that part, regularly blew through that part of the island plan. And here we are 30 years later, and we still have no conservation area designations. The idea of them is that where you have an area which has a particular character, that character has to be maintained. And it doesn't say you cannot develop in that area. It's not like the Coastal National Park or the protected coastal area that we now have, or we're likely to have. It doesn't stop development at all. It just says that these particular areas have a particular character, and that any development has to bear that in mind and has to respond to that character appropriately. The island plan as drafted, the Bridging Island Plan as drafted, only referred to St. Aubin as a conservation area designation. And I spoke with people, particularly at the Société, who were very keen that St. Aubin, whilst a valid area, was actually perhaps, because there is so much protection around St. Aubin already, was perhaps in some ways not so needing the conservation area designation, because it is very difficult to build there and develop there without taking the character into account, because it is heavily protected. But there are plenty of other areas, as I've listed here, from the historic areas of St. Helier, which were very much thought of as needing to be kept, all the way through to those kind of village centres around the churches. And I have listed them, and the listings are, from observation, and they are from an understanding in Jersey that these kind of village centres have their own character. And so Grouville, St. Lawrence, St. Martin, Trinity, St. Mons, St. Peter, St. Clement, Gorey Village and Pier, and of course Rosedale Harbour. There are other areas that could be thought of as the same way, but I put in this list, the Minister has maintained it, which I also see as a form of agreement that these are particularly important historic areas. And to ensure that something is actually done about these areas and they don't just sit in the island plan for the next 30 years without the designation being properly maintained, the Minister has kept the part of my amendment which talked about 4 of these conservation areas should be designated during the course of the Bridging Island Plan, and I think that's absolutely appropriate because it does take work. It takes someone to go out there and survey the area in question, to describe the character of the area. There is some work behind that as well. But I think, personally, this is a really important step forward, a step that should have been taken 30 years ago. But it is an important step forward to making sure that when we develop in Jersey, we don't develop in a way which completely ignores the existing character of an area. We spoke earlier about St. Brillard's Bay, and there is a character there, but too often it is ignored, and new development just takes no account of the actual feeling and character of the bay. This is what this part is intended to do. So it may be an incentive to all members. If this amendment is passed, the 89th Amendment is passed, it then means that my amendment falls away. And I'm quite happy with that. It's one less debate for us to have, and I'm happy with it because the Minister's amendment takes into account my amendment very, very well indeed. So I just thought members should know that. From my perspective, I'm happy to support this amendment with regard to the conservation area designation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any member wish to speak on the 89th Amendment as amended? Yes. Conrad of St. Lawrence.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow my deputy, and just to say I hope members will support this Amendment 89. Shortly after I was elected as constable, I was sorting through some drawers in the office, and I found the proposed conservation area for the village of St. Lawrence, which I believe was prepared about 30 years ago. And I'm very pleased to say that development over the years has not really impinged on the proposed conservation area from 30 years ago. So St. Lawrence is ready and willing to go with the with this proposal, and it needs very little amending to it before we submit it for consideration by the Planning Department, should this be adopted, sir. I look forward to working with them on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie Tarb. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I would like just to say thank you for the Minister for working with me and accepting my amendment. It was some slight different wording proposed, which I agree, and it is important that the Minister recognize that anyone should be able to enjoy easy and inclusive access to the historic environment, and that removing the barriers to access can allow more people to use and benefit from the historic environment. And if it done sensibly, it doesn't need to compromise the ability of future generation to enjoy our historic environment. So I just would like to say thank you for the Minister and hope members will support his amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Conor Talbot and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Notwithstanding that the Deputy of St Peter may criticise me for saying what I'm going to say, I'll take that on the chin. But what I'm going to urge the Minister to do, sir, is make it easy for owners of traditional buildings, historic buildings, to replace these windows. There seems to be a presumption sometimes that owners of old properties want to change windows for the worse. It's certainly not the case. A lot of people will be happy to change them to replicate them in cases of decay and rot. But I would urge him to encourage dialogue between the joiners in the island and the window manufacturers in the island, because sometimes we have a misfit between the aspirations of the planning department and what is actually practical. And I detect in what we've heard today that there is a difference in that case. It's easy for those sitting behind a computer screen to say, oh yes, they must be repaired, but the harsh practicality is sometimes that can't be done. And the practical people doing the work, doing the fitting work, I think should possibly receive a little bit more consultation. So I would urge the Minister to try and point that in the right direction. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor Talbot. Senator Ferguson. Senator Ferguson.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I've lost the button again. A couple of things. One, the manufacturing techniques and materials available are actually resulting in good quality plastic windows which do resemble wood and are very difficult to to distinguish from wood. And I think people, our Victorian ancestors were quite happy to use modern materials in order to get the effect, rather than struggling on with medieval materials. So I think perhaps when you talk about, or when members talk about better liaison with the window glazing industry, I think there should be more emphasis on looking at plastic windows which actually, really resemble wooden windows without actually being wooden windows. And the other point I raise is, well, it's all right saying we're going to have decent access to historic buildings. When are we going to have decent access for disabled people to the States Assembly? Just a thought. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Deputy St Martin.
So very briefly, thank you. I'd just like to talk to a subject which isn't addressed directly in this amendment, but the Minister did mention, and that is a fund to help people who own listed buildings. I'm sure, sir, that we will all know someone who owns or owned a listed building who may well be asset rich but very cash poor, who will have made an application to the department to replace gutters, downpipes and maybe some slates on their listed building, and have applied for non-original type materials, maybe plastic or shaped aluminium, to be told, no, you will fit the appropriate, very expensive options, and the person just can't afford to do that. And the outcome of that going on year after year after year is that the listed building deteriorates, potentially even falls down. And in order to trying our level best to maintain the listed building structure and fabric, we've actually destroyed it in the nth degree, if you like, and that's the dichotomy that we sometimes get with this. So the Minister's absolutely right. What we do need is some sort of a fund where people who can't afford to do these type of repairs are assisted. So for the benefit of the island, we do retain our listed buildings, and we can apply listed building procedures and say to them, no, we'd like you to do this in the gutters, this with the downpipes and this with the slates. It is more expensive, but we're going to compensate you for doing that. So I will be voting with the sir, but it is important that we find a way to do a proper job of protecting listed buildings.
Thank you, Deputy. If no member should speak, I'll ask the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for the from the speakers, which I think kind of summed up the this debate on historic buildings, which I think has been a very good one. Again, a very high quality of debate right way throughout this. A couple of specifics. Very much start, I think, on the theme of conservation areas, picking up Deputy Morell. And I'm grateful for him explaining his amendment and why I was able to incorporate it in. And I think this, he's absolutely right. This has not gone anywhere. I'm hopeful that the reaction which I've sensed from the Assembly today is very positive to that, is a good portent for our debate on the 27th of April. Just to remind members, to flag it up, the reason why that provision was not progressed is because the planning law did not allow it. The Assembly has already agreed the in principle change to the planning law to provide that power to the Minister. At its debate, I can't remember whether it was September or October, but the scrutiny panel did ask, in fact they gave, perhaps rather more than ask, I think, more or less insisted that they would call it in, no, I think actually to be fair, it was correct, that the panel asked to see the details of how we're going to put this into practice. And therefore, work has been very advanced since then by the regulation team and the historic buildings team to put in place both the legal regulations that are required and also the mechanics of how we propose to do it, which at the moment, obviously, I'm at the moment, I'm not sure where we are with the briefing. I think I'm pretty certain that we've sent those papers through to the panel, and I'm getting a nod there from the Constable, which I'm grateful, and I'm hoping that they find favour. But I can flag up now that we certainly, one of the bodies that I think at the moment proposals intend to use is the Jersey Heritage Trust in this work. So I think it's very, very appropriate that we try and use island-based facilities to advance this. Of course, we will have that debate on the articles, and then if the Assembly approves, then we will then have the legal basis in place. It is true that it is quite a task to do these conservation areas. It's not a minor matter. It's not a question of simple bureaucracy. It needs a huge amount of research. And of course, the one thing, just to kind of sum up, what's the difference between a conservation area and a listed building is that a listed building, we protect the building, the particular structure. Conservation areas is where you have an assemblage of buildings or places, streets, what have you, street furniture and all that, that extends. The whole is what matters, and conserving the whole. And of course, when one looks at the names in Deputy Morell's list, he's absolutely right to have identified all that. But choices will be necessary, I'm assured that there are resources in place to make a good start. We'll talk to the scrutiny panel about how far that work can go. And I'm very I'm very pleased. I absolutely support entirely the comments of the Conitable of St Lawrence, because having had the privilege of living in that delightful parish a good number of years ago, quite a long time, I remember walking around those lovely lanes at the back of the parish hall and thinking, this is a place that's just sheer heaven. You could be back in the 17th and 18th century and you wouldn't know that you were in the 21st century. But it's just such a wonderful quality, kind of what I call secret Jersey. It's unknown, that people don't know about it. Maybe I shouldn't be speaking about it in public, keep quiet about it. But that was one of the ones on my list. I said to the officers, right, if we're going to do that, that should be featured. And it's great that the Conitables, I wasn't aware that they've done a lot of work already, which is really brilliant. We'll give a real head start. Constable of St Brelade. Yeah, I think there's no question. I take note. I take that as a request for a greater level of assistance and advice. Obviously, at the moment, we have one person, an historic buildings office, one. At the moment, so there is a limited resource, but I certainly will take that on board and have discussions. And I think that probably links in as well with what the Deputy St Martin said, is that the question of grants. And of course, I'm delighted that I've got the support of the Assistant Minister of Economic Development, Deputy Morell. And what I plan to do, I think, from this is to have further discussions with the Assistant Minister and his boss, the Minister, and see whether we can free up a little bit of money from their pocket of funds, because we do have powers in the planning law to pay grants. We have those powers. They don't need new powers, but we just need access to a budget. So I give that commitment that I will take that away. I think I want to just pick up one other point. I really am grateful, and I'm so pleased, Deputy Russell Labby. I know this is because I think hopefully the members will endorse Deputy Labby's request to withdraw his subsequent amendment, which would of course changed a very great deal, or had the potential to change a very great deal of what we discussed. So I am so grateful. But I want to be sure, I want to put on the records, the changes that I made in my, what's now I think called the second amendment, are absolutely designed, the officers have written them, responding 100% to Deputy's the concerns that gave rise to his previous amendment, which Deputy's now said he will withdraw, and I'm grateful for that, about having a stronger policy. And so the wording in point B of my second amendment is intended to cover that. Of course, we've debated that as read, as it were, so that's in there as well. So I think, having said that, and Senator, I think Deputy Gardner, I'm absolutely with you on this. We'll do our best. I remember there was always a big debate, about Montauk Guy. Montauk Guy, how do you get disability access into Montauk Guy? There are buildings which are extraordinarily difficult. But I think, ways can be found for some of that. But those kind of, in the end, those things are difficult. But one can do one's best. I mean, this building is a classic, isn't it? We should be able to do better than this, I think, to be able to accommodate persons with disability. Although, personally, I do think a brand new States building might be a good idea. That's my personal opinion. Anyway, leave aside that. And Senator Ferguson, thank you. I have to admit, I do apologise, Senator. I think I've forgotten, when I got carried away, I've forgotten what you asked. I'm sure you'll pick me up. Anyway, I make the amended proposition, sir. Thank you.
Sir, if I may, a point of clarification.
Yes.
I was just wondering if the Minister, this is very cheeky, would clarify from his speech he referred to money being available for historic buildings, and if he could clarify whether he knew that that is actually in the heritage strategy as presented by Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I'm delighted to hear that. I have to add, hands up. No, I didn't know that. I think it's wonderful news. So then I just have to have a quick conversation and we're away. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is the appel called for? The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel of the meeting, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce that the amendment has been adopted, 38 votes for and 1 vote contra.
The 1 vote contra is the Deputy of St Peter.
Right. The 74th amendment lodged by Deputy Labby has been withdrawn. Under Article 4A of the Planning and Building Jersey Law 2002, the Minister may propose an amendment to the island plan without the usual lodging period being applied if the states agree. The Minister has lodged an amendment to the 45th Amendment, which should be debated later on today. It has now been circulated to members and published, although recently. Minister, do you wish to propose the amendment to the 45th Amendment to be debated at this sitting of the Assembly?
I'm able to, sir. I think perhaps Constable and I have had prior discussions. If the Constable feels content with it, our members feel I pretend to go ahead with that, sir.
Or do you propose that the states agree that you be permitted to lodge this amendment today?
Yes, sir. I believe it's a minor amendment, and under the rules, I've tried to discipline myself that these are technical amendments. I think this is a minor but an important adjustment on the matter that the Conitava is bringing that will help this Assembly clear business. Thank you.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir. Sir, could we just have a notice of what it actually says? If it's
Well, I
not-
was going to say,
Please,
if members haven't had the opportunity of reading the email, which was sent very recently, then in that case I invite the greffier to read the terms of the proposed amendment to the 45th Amendment lodged by the Conitava St Brelard.
Page 2, after the words should be deleted, insert the words and, after the words tourist destination area, there should be inserted the words or for new or extended uses associated with daytime economy uses within the defined centre at Lacheneve.
Now, does anyone wish to speak on the proposal that this business be taken, this amendment be debated today?
So I was slow on this, Deputy Taddier. I was slow on the mark to intervene, but I wanted to hear from the Minister before this was proposed as to the nature of it. I know it's been circulated, but as to what it covers and why he thinks it's a good idea and whether it's been accepted before we can agree to that. But he can do that in the summing up, no doubt.
Yes, he can. Deputy of St Peter.
So may I request the wording is put into chat? I haven't got it in my pack. I'm sorry, but it's on my email. Or can we have it in chat? We've all got the same version.
Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Accordingly, I call upon the Minister to reply.
Thank you, sir. Yes, this is the amendment is to make a change for this particular policy in the draft plan, which deals with I think what used to be euphemistically called the nighttime economy. And at the moment, the plan that we have includes also the centre, the defined centre at Lacheneve. And the defined centre is not the whole area of Lake Heneve that we discussed the other day. It's a very tightly drawn area of where we have current businesses. I don't know if perhaps members, one of my officers in the chat could put this reduced map. So what it will do, at the moment, the draft plan says that we should extend, I can't remember, this is relating to evening economy, which the intent would be applied also to Lake Heneve. I believe now that that goes too far in the situation of Lake Kennervay, and the amendment is to effectively limit the effect of that policy in Lake Kennervay to daytime uses, daytime economy. The idea being that instead of opening up the possibility where you could have late night functions, you know, I don't know, I'm not an expert in licensing law, but there are all sorts of things, nightclubs and what have you, which potentially could increase the level of noise and nuisance in that area. But what I mean is the daytime economy is slightly widening the range of uses, to allow what, you know, cafes, this kind of daytime use, which will generally finish their use around probably 8 or 9 at night, because that does give the opportunity for both inducing vitality and gives an opportunity for getting some investment in that area. Those conditions on those uses can be controlled by planning conditions. And so what I put to the Constable, because the Constable has his amendment, it's on the agenda, and what I would ask that when we get to his amendment, that my amendment can be debated, so we remove any suggestion of nighttime economy in what I would call the true sense of the word from the island plan policy, so that we just deal with something which I think is less problematic. So obviously it's up to members when they want, whether they want to go ahead to make that to allow me to bring that last minute. I see it as a technical minor change, but an important one nonetheless, certainly for residents of Lake Kennervay. And obviously if members don't allow it to debate, we will have to make a choice on the Constable's amendment as it stands, is to remove that reference entirely. I hope we don't do that, because I do believe we do need increasing the range of uses from sort of pure, what I call retail, which that centre has struggled with, you know, would assist, I think, some economic regeneration and encourage new uses in investment. It is, I'm in the Assembly's hands whether we can debate this. Thank you, sir.
Are members content to permit the Minister to propose the amendment on a standing vote?
Yes, sir.
Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. So that proposition is adopted. The 14th Amendment is lodged by the Deputy of St Peter. Deputy, this also concerns windows.
So as I understand, that's my original amendment that was amended by the Minister that we debated.
Well, it's still a list of a debate, not been formally withdrawn. Are you content to withdraw it now?
Oh, yes, of course, it's been superseded. Yes, sir. Sorry, I didn't realise that was the question.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to the 45th Amendment, lodged by the Connétable of St Brelade. And I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, after the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words accept that within policy ER4 Part 1. The words the defined centre at the Kennervay should be deleted.
Connétable of St Brelade.
Thank you, sir. This amendment is really proposed in order to give residents of the area the confidence that their present peaceful lives won't be shattered by a nighttime economy. We respect there is a nighttime economy. It is principally centred in town. We see the clubs and various venues attracting people, and I don't doubt it is popular within certain sectors of residents of the island. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm not a party pooper by any stretch of the imagination, but a residential area such as Lake Kennervay is unsuitable for that. And unamended, so the island plan indicated that it would be opened up to businesses of that nature. The present infrastructure, so quite frankly, isn't equipped to deal with this at that end. Our honorary police can only do so much. We have limited resource. Without consultation, the States of Jersey police are excellent in their support, but they have enough on their plate during the late evenings in town to deal with without having to come out to the west. So, sir, I simply suggest that Kenbay gets taken out for that purpose, and the Minister will proposing his small amendment to that in due course, which will basically allow a daytime economy up to early evening, and we don't want to stop any restaurants or coffee shops or anything like that being set up in the area. That's the last thing we would wish to do, but there has to be an evening cut-off time of, I don't know, 8 or 9, something like that, so that residents can live in peaceful tranquility in that suburban area. I make the proposition, sir.
Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There is an amendment lodged by the Minister, and I invite the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, after the words should be deleted, insert the words and. After the words tourist destination area, there should be inserted the words or for new or extended uses associated with daytime economy uses within the defined centre at Kenbay.
Minister.
Sir, like everybody else, obviously I only had the final version of this a couple of minutes ago. I'm just trying to refer to the list. I think members will probably want to know, most importantly, what are the uses that this would include. The list that I'm given that my amendment would enable to happen in the Kenbay are under the use class orders, which would include Class B, cafe and restaurants. It would include Class G, social, including gallery, museum, libraries, community centres. Class I, entertainment venues such as a cinema, but excluding Class M, late night entertainment, including bars, nightclubs and public houses. And so that is the essence of it. The suggestion in the report that the planning consent for such uses, if they happen, can be conditioned to limit hours of opening to 9 to 10 p.m. By planning condition. I think that could be subject to, well, certainly if it wouldn't be, it's not in the policy. That would be a decision, I think, for the parish and the community to decide what levels of that restriction of hours is appropriate if such a use was to happen. That's normally the case in all sorts of places. I think there's probably stepping out of line of the brief here. I don't think that includes takeaways. I think takeaways have an issue of their own, I think. So I think because takeaways involve a lot of traffic coming and going and hanging around and all this type of thing, and do unfortunately give rise to some antisocial activity. But well managed, that can be avoided. But I think those can be downstream planning decisions. But in principle, I think what we're doing is changing a policy to remove the nighttime reference to make it sure this is daytime only. So I'm sorry that that came about lately. I was reviewing over the weekend the Constable's amendment, and I advised the officers that I decided I was going to support the Constable because I did not want to see evening. And well, I get shaking of heads here, but look, I'm afraid the concern, I live in that area. I have to listen to what residents have to say, and I make a judgment. And so in working my officers, I think the objective is to try and have planning policies. I can hear a lot of mumbling, sir. I don't know what I've done to upset that, but I think it's important that we have opportunities to be able to enable a wider range of activities which have economic benefit. In the end, if members don't wish to do so, then please vote against my amendment, in which case I shall probably vote with a constable to vote to support his amendment. So there we are, you've got the range of choices. I would hope you go with my amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank
So
you.
can I ask a point of clarification, please?
Of the Minister?
Yes,
Yes.
just to be clear as to what this amendment does, if I may. Sorry, I should stand up. I'm doing the same thing. I'm catching it. So if I may, so this amendment adds the words defined centre within the policy. Sorry, I've got the wrong. It's very difficult because we've now got two formats for the amendments. Let alone the fact that the minister's messed up my spreadsheet, which I will never forgive him for. Sorry about that. So it should be, after the words tourist destination, there should be inserted the words uses of the daytime economy. So is this amendment saying that actually these extensions in ER4 can happen, but only within a daytime economy? And how does the minister define daytime? Is it within light hours or is it a particular time of day? Because I think that's quite important in terms of seeing the implication of this amendment. I hope that clarification is clear.
Yes. You've been asked a question by the Deputy Ward.
Oh, I do apologise, sir. I was trying to read the policy. Page 152 is where the relevant policy. We've now moved on into what I call the economy section of the plan. And this is a policy for daytime and evening economy uses. And I think the opening paragraph is what I'm seeking to change. It says, and I'll read what at the moment it says in the draft plan, proposals for new or extended uses associated with the daytime and evening economy within St Helier Town Centre, the defined centre at Lake Kennervay, or at a tourist destination will be supported where the proposal does not have an unacceptable impact on neighbouring residents and uses. And then it goes on in a lot more detail, but I think the key thing is that first paragraph. The first paragraph sets a policy, if you like, St Helier Town Centre, the defined centre at Lake Kennervay, or at a tourist destination centre, like, for example, St Albans or Goree. We all know where they are. And so this is an enabling policy that does give positive support for the daytime and evening economy. What I'm proposing to do is, my amendment seeks to do, is to amend that so that the reference to nighttime economy at the defined centre at Lake Kennervay is changed to be only daytime economy activities. Now, what uses would that be? This is where the use class order, which is an order set by the minister, who classifies the type of uses as to when a use moves from, say, one class to another, there needs to be an application for a change of use. And so obviously, if it's the same use class, it doesn't need an application. That's probably something that, in the fullness of time, the new minister, or indeed probably I could do it under business as usual, I suppose. If I could get the legal resource to just enhance that. But I think I'm making an enabling change to a policy. But I'm proposing to make that change, which will provide the tools for the new planning committee, new planning decision makers to be able to deal with planning applications for changes in the Kennervay area, but they would not be able to include nighttime uses. And so that's why I've made the change, and I said I should have perhaps spotted that before, and that should not have included nighttime uses at Lake Kennervay. The defined centre, there's a map, and I wish I had it here. Unfortunately, it's not been circulated in the draft. It is very tightly drawn around the shopping, Les Canaves shopping parade. It also includes, I think, you know, the sort of area around Industrial House and that around the back corner of Red Houses. I think it probably includes the Horse of Hound and other places like, oh, I think I'm pleased to see nodding, there is a map. But it's a tightly drawn area. And so that is what my proposal is. But as I say, I'm trying to be helpful because I think that's an important change. But I say, if members don't want that change, I'll be quite frank, I'll probably support the Constable in his request to take out the reference to the Kenove entirely, I think. Thank you.
So
I think
just
you were
one further
also asked by the Deputy when daytime finished and evening began.
So I have a further clarification as well. Can we assume that the Kenove defined centre does not contain a tourist destination in any form? Because it could be a contradiction in the words, unless you take tourist destination out as well. I'm assuming that the area drawn around the Kenove, I might be being a bit pedantic here, but I think I just want to understand what's going on. The area drawn around the Kenove, which I can see helpfully on Deputy Ayer's screen, doesn't contain any tourist destination because that is also a separate area for nighttime economy development within ER4, I thought. Sorry, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, so I confess that I'm not able to answer what I'd have to take advice. I don't know if I'm able to ask for an adjournment, if you wish, for 5 minutes to get clarification on that, or maybe the Attorney General. I would be seeking the use class as being what would be a use, and the hours of use, I would have thought, is a matter that the Planning Committee can put on any individual consent, and that's done all the time. Lots of premises on the island have limits on their hours of opening. That's routinely done. But I mean, if we want to adjourn or me to come back, sir.
If it may help, it's not that important, honestly. Yes. I think we can. It's the main debate. I think that it's the issue regards this. So I'm not sure worried. Thank you.
So, if I may assist.
Well, if you're going to make a speech, that's fine. You're entitled to make a speech on the amendment if you wish to. Do you want to make a speech now?
I can, sir.
Yes.
Indeed. In terms of tourism destination places, the only one nearby that I'm aware of is the Lavender Farm, which is outside the actual centre, as mentioned. So, really, I thank the Minister for bringing this, which is an improvement to my amendment, simply because I didn't wish to preclude the daytime economy, and that was a risk that my unamended amendment was throwing up. So we're used to the nighttime economy to a degree in St Brelade's, and I might refer to St Albans. Some will refer to it as being the frying pan of the island. We have a lot of restaurants. We know that restaurants run generally till around 11 o'clock, and those who make use of it, I know, appreciate it. We have a good offering, and they will generally, those that eat there, they will generally leave by about 11 o'clock. The last buses leaving St Albans at 11 o'clock are an experience to behold, and the Honorary Police do struggle sometimes to manage the queues of 100 people waiting to get on a double-decker, which actually takes something like 20 minutes to do. And I applaud the bus drivers and the bus company for managing it in the way they do. But it does need to be managed, and it takes up a significant amount of resource to do that. And I say that we don't have the resource in the parish to manage that in Les Canaves as well, and I believe neither do the States of Jersey Police unless drawn by emergencies, which obviously we don't want to encourage. So whilst I want to preclude the Kenove area from having a strong nighttime economy, I believe the wording as submitted by the Minister in his amendment to mine makes it more acceptable, and I would urge members to support it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colin Tyler. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And it's more, I think as well, I think I will be supporting the amendment to the amendment, but I think this is touching on an interestingly kind of overlooked part of the plan, almost certainly not overlooked by the Connétable of St Brelade or any of the deputies of St Brelade. But the island plan does start talking, I think possibly for the first time, no, I may be wrong in that, about Lekenevie as a second town for the island. And what we're seeing in this debate is that kind of taking shape. You're bringing more, I suppose, for most of my life, except for Lekenevie precinct and those other small precincts around there, Lekenevie has, in my mind at least, been principally a suburban area, a residential area, and with certain services such as education to support the people living there. Because now we're talking about it being a place where people go for enjoyment, for recreation, as an alternative to St Helier. I'm neither for nor against that. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it and understand what it means. But given the Connotab's kind of graciously said that members can support this amendment to the amendment, I certainly will be. And I just think it's worth members thinking about that. This is essentially, step by step, a second town appearing in Jersey. Be that for the better or the worse, I truly don't know. But it's an interesting part of the island plan, but it's not been talked about much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadeo.
Thank you, sir. I'll follow on from that point very quickly. I see it in a slightly different way, is that I think what the plan is doing, it's acknowledging that Lekenevie is the second urban area, just de facto. I think it uses those exact words, purely because it's got such a high densely populated area, and going to be even more densely populated in the future, thanks to the amendment of the Minister. And I guess the question then is about, well, are we going to have the corresponding flip side of the coin, the positive stuff that goes with all that, that gives it value and status, if you like? Because it's one thing to say this is the second town from a housing perspective, but it's a very different proposition if you're actually going to invest in that as well. And just as a historical aside, of course, we know that the important cities and towns in Jersey, rather, have changed. So St Helier wasn't always the capital, and St Albans was, in many ways, not necessarily the capital, but it was a significant town, as was Gorey, as a port, and things do change. But it's quite right that St Albans still has is the major tourist destination in the same way that St Bullard's Bay is already. And I welcome the removal of the nighttime economy possibilities in the Lekenevie area, because that would have been wholly inappropriate. As somebody who's lived and grown up there and was going out socialising well into my 30s living there, I knew the routine fairly well. Is that if you wanted to go out, you've got a couple of venues. So the Horse and Hounds is the classic one, and that's tightly defined within that orange boundary that the planning officers have kindly circulated. And if you want to stay out later, you've got the option of going to St Aubin, or more likely, what you do is head down into St Bullard's Bay in the summer, where there are hotels that stay open a bit later. So if you want to socialise till, say, 12 o'clock or so, you can do that. And that's going to remain the same. So Lekenevie does have those tourism and social and leisure offerings on its doorstep. But we've also got to remember, and this is, I guess, the question, and part of the problem of this amendment coming very late, is that it can't be that restrictive. And I'll give an example, that there are places outside of that very tightly controlled area which still constitute Lekenevie. And of course, we wouldn't want to see a wide proliferation of commerce and anything late night, even outside of that area. But you do have places like the social club just up the road, which is still in Lekenevie, but as you're getting towards the airport, and then you've got the tennis clubs and the offering that goes on behind there as you're going down towards Montelabruin. And of course, as you go in towards Le Creux, you've also got another social club there. And those are not going to be swinging nightclubs, sir, but they might be areas, of course, where you will have late night functions on occasion. And I think that's quite right. And that's not something which will be defined or designated by planning. It's something that will be dealt with under the usual parish and licensing benches, sir. So I think the key thing for me is that we want to see appropriate offerings and regeneration possibilities in the Lakena Bay area, and without it resorting to late night openings. And so I do welcome the Minister coming to the table fairly late with this, and I hope that even if it's an imperfect amendment, because I do see the confusion as to why do we need to say daytime. If it's not nighttime, then it's obviously going to be daytime. But of course, daytime hours vary during the year, so I think the wording that's being used is perhaps not necessarily the clearest, but I think we understand what the intention is there, sir, and it will provide some relief, I think, to the representatives and the residents of the area.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on the... Oh, yes, Deputy Truscott.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow Deputy Teddier and really concur with what he said, and I can totally understand where the Constable was coming from originally. 11 o'clock throw-out time effectively wouldn't be acceptable going forward. But we both, Deputy Tedder and I, go back a long way in the parish, and certainly I can remember that originally there was a restaurant above the Larisha Stores that was there originally. There was a Chinese restaurant above Industria House. There was Roosters. It's sadly we've lost those. I mean, I guess it's it's down to economics and profitability, and it's perhaps not that much of a tourist destination in that respect if businesses like that can't stay afloat. But I just think for the vibe of the area, certainly an 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock finish wouldn't be out of the way, and I think it just brings that little bit of vibrancy to the area that is so needed. Certainly the planning committee, recently we do get involved with setting times, and I'm sure that would continue in this case. And even at the parish hall assembly, where the licensing panel often will designate an opening and closing time. So I'm happy that we're all supporting the amendment to the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I think I'm just slightly confused because the wording is that there is an extension for uses associated with a daytime economy. So therefore you can extend different businesses and different activities for people. But it's just odd to me that it seems that after a certain time, once the sun goes down, it's, to quote, I suppose I could quote the Arctic Monkeys, they say it changes when the sun goes down. I mean, I don't quite understand how this is going to work and what it's going to achieve. And my concern in the back of my mind is a sort of demonisation of people who want to stay out a bit later, or companies that want to stay open a bit later, or because and it's one of the reasons, and I've got to say, and I have a vested interest in this, I think it's one of the reasons that we've seen the demise of live music on this island, because there seems to be an attitude that anything that's late, there's only got to be in a couple of places in the centre of town, and that's it. And those places are dying because of high costs of rental and rates and the lack of facilities and so on. And the issues that may arise, and I know it's one about, buses back to town. Well, the solution is to put more buses on. There are solutions to these things, which don't mean that we have a sort of curfew. And I can't believe that the residents of St Brellards need that much control over their behaviour that they have to, go to bed at 9 o'clock and go home. I don't quite understand. Whereas in St Helier, it's okay. It's open up. It's fine. If you're living in the centre of St Helier with no access to park space and no access to anything else in a small flat which is hardly affordable, or you're renting off somebody at some extortionate rate, that's okay. You can have as much noise and as much input as possible, and it's fine. I just think there's a built-in inequity here, and I don't know, a sort of fear of something that doesn't need to be feared. I don't think the majority of people who stay out late and have a good time beyond 9 o'clock was the time that was mentioned, want to create havoc. And there are young people in that area that want to go somewhere late, and that's what generates the problems, I think. So if we don't have somewhere late for young people, you know, they don't go to bed at 8:30 and, you know, read their book, have their glass of milk and wake up the next morning like, you know, the Waltons. I mean, there's so much more to be had here. And I just have I don't know, perhaps I'm completely wrong, and I may well be, but there's just something in the back of my mind that has an unease with this sort of regulation. But that's my penny's worth, so thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't going to speak on this, but there are elements of some of the comments that have been made that sort of concerns me to some degree. I think the ability to socialise and the ability for residents to be able to find somewhere within a local vicinity to go for a drink or have an evening out, I think is really important. And I'm pleased to follow Deputy Walker because he touches on a lot of important points around the ability for people to make their own choice about where they go in the evening and to what time they stay out. I do understand the constable's concerns, and I do understand the London Police's concerns around having the capability to be able to police a large number of public houses. But in terms of public houses not behaving themselves or acting in a way that is not beneficial to local residents, there are controls there. Parish Assembly, the Licensing Assembly, the bench itself have got controls, and the Constable himself can always bring a representation to the Licensing Assembly. So there are controls there to ensure that pubs and restaurants behave themselves and are not unruly and make sure they manage the alcohol that they serve. What does concern me is that certainly some of the comments in the report around some of the negativity that's attached to public houses and people drinking in them. Yes, do you get antisocial behaviour with public houses occasionally? Of course you do. Do you get people that drink too much? Of course you do. Do you need to manage it? Absolutely. Is it a strain on police resources? Of course it is. But by merely trying to push it or limit the number of available places where people can drink is only going to do one thing. It's going to drive people to drink more at home, with all the risks that go along with that. Unregulated drinking at harmful levels at home, with the risk of, and we know the risks involved with that, with domestic abuse. So that the assaults aside, the serious assault side, don't go away just because you drive it into people's homes. So I think we need to be really careful where we go with this. I think there is a process in place at the moment that if a new establishment wanted to open in Kennervay, there are procedures to follow. The public would have their opportunity to voice their concerns, as they always do at parish assemblies. I've been to many where there's been concerns raised around a new outlet opening or somewhere wanting to extend their hours, or that's democracy. But what I don't want to do is go down the NIMBYistic road of trying to control everything we do. I'm going to support this because I think there is a need to ensure that residents in Kennervay are protected, but there are controls there now. And what I don't want to see is the inability of a new outlet or a new pub being able to open if it's in an appropriate place and if it acts and is intending to act in an appropriate way. It's important that people have social outlets. People can go out and enjoy themselves without having to travel either to St Albans or into town to have to do it. They should be able to walk to a pub or somewhere if they want to go for a drink. They shouldn't have to get on a bus and and travel somewhere to do it. I'm fortunate. I can walk to Kennervay if I don't drink, or if I do, it's very, very rarely. But I do appreciate the fact that people do enjoy a drink, and I don't want to take that away or limit that to people. So there are some risks involved here with amendments such as these. So I just want us to be a little bit cautious around how we manage this in future. This shouldn't be a carte blanche to stop a new outlet opening. But I do respect the fact that the Kennervay is in essence a residential area. The centre part of it around Red Houses is a little bit more commercial, as is the area around Kennervay Precinct. But there are other public houses and places where you can go for a drink, or restaurants around the parish, and it's vibrant, and we want it to remain vibrant. And people that come and stay in St Brellards or come and visit St Brellards like to have a choice, and that choice in recent years has been greatly diminished, and I don't want to see that diminished anymore by overbearing planning laws that don't allow people to start up a new establishment if it's in the appropriate place. So that's really my message, is just let's be careful what we wish for here. But I will support this because it's the right thing to do if it's managed in the appropriate way. And that's something I'll be keeping a close eye on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Labby.
Well, I'll be very quick because Senator Palliser and Deputy Ward have covered what I wanted to say. I mean, are we saying that if I want to book a table for dinner and I live in the Kennervay, and I want to book a table for dinner at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I can't do that because that's closing time in the establishments. Well, what kind of business is going to start up? And restaurants is a huge investment and start up financially if they can't serve customers between 8 and 11. Is that what this does? It shuts down that. I'd like to know.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. And I'm very pleased to follow Deputy Ward as well. It's not often I can say that, but I am today. And I quite like his analogy of the Waltons. I've often seen his little group of, good night, Senator Sam, good night, Deputy Ward. It would be, it's a nice image. But we've just had an incredibly damning report from the competition regulator as to how we run our licensing trade in Jersey. And anybody who wants to read it should read it, because it basically says it makes it very difficult for anybody to operate here in a competitive manner. And this sort of thing makes it even tougher. And you talk to young people today, and Deputy Ward's 100% right. They're looking for live music. They're looking for places to go to. But under our rules and regulations, and this would just be yet another one, it makes it more and more difficult for people to operate on the island. Hopefully that will change after this report, and we'll have to see. But if we don't, and it's a fairly light-hearted remark, sir, but it was true that there was a place, or is a place, called Frinton in the UK, which is very, very famous for being a retirement village. And for years and years and years, they never even had a pub. Music was banned. It was very much a quiet place. And there used to be a sign that said Harwich for the continent. And someone wrote underneath, and Frinton for the incontinent. Now, we don't want to get a reputation where Jersey becomes a really, really boring and dull destination. But if we're not careful, that is where we're heading, not just for tourists, but also for younger people who live here. And we have to really guard against that. And that's why I would definitely be opposing this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. There's a question for the Attorney General from Deputy Tadier.
Yes, sir, thank you. It's just to make sure that we're keeping on the right track. It's really important, I think, especially with the last-minute amendment, that we know exactly what this amendment does and doesn't do. So the question to the Attorney General, sir. So can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, it's just a strange echo. I wasn't sure if it was you trying to intervene, sir. The question to the Attorney General is to ask, with his legal interpretation, if this was passed today, would it stop the kind of activities that Deputy Russell Lovey's asked about? So if a restaurant wanted to set up within the Kennervay area serve food until 9 o'clock, and those existing bars which already exist and can serve till 11 o'clock, that if they wanted to, someone wanted to open a pub in the area, is that going to be prohibited under what the Minister's amendment seeks to do?
Yes. Mr. Attorney?
I didn't hear all of Deputy Labby's speech, I'm afraid, sir, but I think I've got the gist of Deputy Teddy's question. Could I have a moment just to think about my answer, please?
Yes. We'll
Thank you.
come back to you in a little while if that's all right. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if it's an opportune moment to ask for the adjournment. I don't know if it's, I'm in members' hands, but we've got 10 minutes left. I think it would be good to hear from the Attorney General tomorrow. Members got time to think about what this really means and read it.
Well, it's a matter for the members, not for me, but Deputy Gila is about to speak. Should we carry on for 10 minutes? Deputy Teddy, it's a matter for you. You want to propose your adjournment, you can.
If Deputy Gila wants to speak, otherwise I'm either way. I wouldn't want to cut anyone off, sir.
Yes. Thank you. Deputy Gila.
Yes, sir. Indeed, I think the Assembly has strayed quite a bit from the original intent. So if I can, and I hope that the Minister will correct me when he has the opportunity if I'm wrong, but the island plan has expanded the possibility for development in a few areas. So the idea is to include things that are other than retail, such as, for example, cafes, bars, restaurants, museums, those classes that the Minister described. That's the island plan. The Constable of St. Brelard has wanted to exclude Lake Enevé out of those new developments so that there was no chance of a night economy developing in Lake Enevé. The new amendment to Amendment 45 that the Minister just brought today, minutes ago, actually modifies that so that the island plan now actually excludes nighttime economy in Lake Enevé. So if we vote for the Minister's amendment, the new economy that will be allowed in Lake Enevé is only daytime economy, which can be regulated by time to include restaurants that do serve in the evening. And the now I'm lost. And Amendment 45 therefore becomes unnecessary. So that's how I understand it. So if you want anything other than retail in Lake Enevé, you need to vote for the Minister's amendment. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? No. Mr. Attorney, do you want to respond to the question now? Would you rather respond first thing tomorrow morning in accordance with the suggestion that we might adjourn?
So I think I do need just a little more time. I'm just the amendment was obviously circulated very late today.
So could I propose the adjournment anyway? And then I think we're not going to finish this debate today, and it'd be helpful to do it.
Is the adjournment second?
Yes, sir.
Anyone wish to speak on the adjournment? No. Accordingly, the states stand adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Sadie.